Welcome to another discussion about Unholy. This is definitely not the second take of this because the audio was messed up. We need to get all the awkwardness out of the conversation. But we are going to be talking about Unholy today with Taez and Biceps, which if you don't know who they are, you probably should, especially if you're an Unholy fan. You probably have seen them in our past podcasts. I'm going to let the guys quickly introduce themselves so I don't talk too much. And we are going to discuss a lot more about what the state of Unholy is today and what it's likely going to look like in 10.1. So starting off with Taez, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, my man, can you give people a little bit of an intro?
Hey, everybody. I'm Taez one of the main theory crafters for Death Knight. Do a lot of math, make sure people are informed on, what's the best way to go about things, and yeah, just love DK in general.
Sweet. And Biceps, the YouTube star, is pretty much the only DK content on YouTube that I can find. Wait a second.
Hey guys, Bicepspump here. I write the DK DPS guide for Wowhead and Ice Veins. I stream on Twitch and I also do guide content on YouTube. This is, both mid-class raid as well as some more mathsy analysis type of video.
I think we can actually go into a little bit of how the state of the Unholy DK is, because obviously we're seeing it in MDI. It's kind of like, I don't know how it is for you guys, but for us, Unholy is always like, oh, the PI breadwinner in raid, so it's always slapping, which is something that I don't know if we have seen that much in Shadowlands by the end. I don't know if we personally haven't seen them, but remember in Nathria, they were like really big in raids. So as kind of like the first raid here and the season is close to an end, what do you guys think of the overall performance in the meta? Anything that it could have it changed to be, a little bit more competitive, if that's even necessary? So what are you, let's start with M+, I suppose. We can go from Biceps now.
All right. Yeah, obviously, Unholy is kind of like the go-to pick in the MDI. And that's specifically because Unholy scales very well with target count. So we have Epidemic, our lots and lots of like linear scaling diseases kind of thing, means that at the end of an MDI dungeon, Unholy will be top one overall. Unfortunately, that doesn't translate that well into competitive Mid Plus. So when you start pushing higher keys, when you go above 25, you don't see the kind of big pulls that Unholy needs to really shine. But more importantly, we don't bring the kind of utility which is really sought after in that environment. And since it's very, very competitive, that just means that Unholy isn't one of their meta picks. I changed now though. Like we did get significant buffs this reset. So who knows? Maybe we'll be brought a little bit more. But we'll always suffer from the fact that we don't bring a useful kind of party buffs. We don't have any of those very nice dispels that you need in multiple dungeons. And we don't have an AoE stun either.
And I assume this kind of probably only applies to like high keys, late game stuff. I mean, we can probably assume that every spec, Unholy included, can easily clear like plus 20, 22, 23, 24s, even higher keys, right? But it will probably be apparent that, okay, well, if we had a Havoc, we would have had an AoE stun, a magic debuff, because Vengeance is not at the top of the meta anymore. And since I would imagine this also shares kind of an issue with it having a tank spec, and usually when the tank spec is really good, even less of a reason to see probably a DPS spec, let alone Unholy. But I don't imagine this applies to raids either, as far as you guys have been experiencing. Plus, I mean, it's I've seen your what was it, the 13 Unholy heroic raids blasting with all the PIs. So obviously that goes to show what Unholy can actually do when in the proper conditions. So what are you guys' opinion on Unholy in raids?
It's been a roller coaster, man. There's first tier. To be honest, Blizzard has been very active when it comes to like fixing, buffing, changing. Yeah. So it's been, everything has been around quite a lot. But just looking back, right, start tier, Unholy was really, really bad because we had this annoying Unholy aura bug. You know that aura that increases pet damage?
Yeah.
It didn't hit any of the bosses. Like most of the bosses in the raid weren't affected by it. So Unholy was just really, really bad. And then it kind of got good, and then lots of other specs got buffed, and it kind of fell back down. But this latest reset, we got an 8% buff and honestly, we are pumping so hard. I was top DPS in pretty much every single fight last reclair. So Unholy is currently like the best spec in the game in the raid.
In terms of overall output?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty cool to hear. Do you think, I mean, we can probably go to it eventually, this is how this will translate into 10.1, but I would imagine, Taez, you feel the same, or do you have like a different experience in the game?
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much lines up with my experience too. Like Unholy started really low, went up pretty high, and then started to fall off a little bit before this latest buff. But honestly, looking at it, I think they might have overbuffed it. Like, it's incredibly strong right now. Like, we were looking to have some issues in 10.1, and they kind of like preemptively buffed us, but like we're kind of broken right now, if I'm being entirely honest.
I mean, you know, usually when we do some meta analysis, it's a little bit more surface level, because if we go like super in depth into a lot of stuff, it just gets a little bit too muddy. But overall, looking in the rankings, however much this matters, Unholy is kind of like middle of the pack. Red is definitely dominating everything. And this is always weird because, you know, this is maybe one of the first places that people visit when they try to look at the specs performance, but obviously it's never that clear because it doesn't tell you the whole story. But we know from our Unholy that it really does a lot of damage, and this is kind of confirmed by you guys as well. So I think that Unholy probably had maybe a better success story at the beginning of Dragonflight compared to other specs, and it's a good example for a lot of things, in my opinion. It's a good example for a well-designed spec in terms of like the talent system. And as much as I was able to see, even though I don't play Unholy as much as I used to do, I did check the builds. Every now and again, I noticed that there's some build difference. There's some like pet focus and disease focus. And I mean, we've talked about this before. This is something that people have been asking for a long time because it just colors the DK in all sorts of flavors. And that's really cool. And going from, you know, oh, this actually has some issues, let's fix them, let's make it good. Because these types of things usually took about a patch or two, or maybe an expansion to be aired out. So it's really cool that we have them all let's say resolved halfway through a season, which is, you know, ideally it's probably good to never have them in the first place, but you know, we don't live in a perfect world. But with that out of the way, going into 10.1, considering it's so close, what do you guys think so far from what you have seen, tested, theory crafted, anything that you managed to get your hands on when it comes to 10.1? In terms of Unholy, anything goes, anything's on the table. I see Biceps grinning there. All right, man. I need to know what you're thinking right now, man. Tell it to me.
All right, we have a big problem, right? Box is an insane trinket for us. And it's so good. If you have it like 415, it's better than anything you can get next season.
Next season?
Right? As in 10.1, right? So what's the highest? Is it 441? Something like that.
447.
Wow. 447. If you get 447 trinket, it won't be better than a 415.
Oh no, we're doing it again, right? Man.
This is a big issue because every other class out there is going to look at a trinket, get like a 30 eye level upgrade on it. Unholy won't get it. And, you know, it's incredibly unlikely that it stays this way. So I cannot foresee a future where they don't nerf Box. Because imagine you go into 10.1, you have this set of players that go 415, 421 Boxes, and then you can't get a new one. Like there's no way to get a higher level Box in 10.1. So they're going to have to nerf it. Otherwise, you will have a situation where, you know, playing in 10.0.7 is a legitimate upgrade to join in the game 10.1. And I think that's unhealthy. So I foresee a future where we're going to 10.1, they're going to gutter Box, and it's going to be terrible for Unholy. Because really big part of our damage comes from the fact that Box is really good. We don't have any good replacement for it. And that's just going to make our damage, you know, drop off a cliff. Like we're not going to scale at all in 10.1.
I mean, I just sent you a link as well, Flav, if you wanted to show it on stream. It's a comparison of a 421 puzzle box versus every single trinket available to Unholy next season. It's not looking that great. And yeah. Sorry, making you mess up the stream layout for a second.
It's all cool. It's all cool. Wow, dude.
Yup.
It's 1% better than a 20 eye level best trinket that you could replace it with. It's still 1%
and that's
better.
the super rare class trinket, which is meant to be incredibly strong.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's exactly like Bicep said, and I have like a follow-up question. This is, I think, a symptom also mostly revolving around Unholy's design, because obviously a lot of classes like puzzle box, but not all classes might feel the same way. And maybe it's something to do with how mastery scales, maybe something to do with how strong mastery is. Maybe if they nerf mastery, that will probably be bad for the spec. So in terms of overall design, because they're definitely going to nerf, they're not going to, I mean, they said so that they want to nerf the Onyx amulets because they don't want that to be like a season 2 thing. They just want to, a fun little toy that we can play with. So I don't see a world where they don't nerf this, but it's weird because my kind of question is, and I don't know if I can phrase it right, because it kind of slightly reminds me of Gavel, and during Shadow, the last season of Shadowlands, it kind of gave me the impression that Unholy and DKs and Reds and other melees were not that great until you got Gavel, and it felt like Gavel did a lot of heavy lifting to prop other melees, Unholy especially, into competitiveness. Is this the same for Puzzle Box, or Puzzle Box is just a really strong addition and Unholy is gonna be fine without it?
It's the same thing for Unholy, right?
Yeah.
Without Puzzle, Unholy is nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so without Puzzle
What
Box,
they need to do, right? As soon as 10.1 hits, they go, all right. They write a blue post saying, we understand that Puzzle Box is far too powerful for multiple specs, so we're going to gutter it, and we're going to buff those specs to kind of, not make it terrible for them. That would make me happy. I'm not sure if they're going to do it, but I think that's the solution here. Remove Puzzle from the game and then buff everyone that relies too heavily on it.
Yeah, though I don't know if there's anybody who's quite as insane as Unholy with it, because it accounts for 15.5% of our overall damage. It's just absolutely absurd for a trinket to be that strong.
As far as
it's not even due to mastery scaling, it's due to our damage window being so incredibly concentrated in these 3 minutes, right? So we do, if you look at a fight which lasts for 3 minutes, right? The amount of damage that comes in the first 40 seconds is 30-40% of the entire damage you put out. So the fact that it's so concentrated means that anything that buffs that window is going to be very powerful. And Puzzle specifically has a very high stat budget because it has this little casting in it. So you have this negative, meaning that the positive is much higher, and that makes it even stronger.
I see. Well, I mean,
so nerf Puzzle, buff Unholy. That's the kind of path forward.
As far as I've been able to test, because I've played a bunch of melees, and the one that seems to benefit the most from what I have played was Survival Hunter, which was a very big surprise for me, because Survival doesn't like mastery generally, but this is so much that it kind of offsets that situation. And I mean, we've seen nerfs to it, so I wouldn't be surprised if they nerf it. Wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities, and it's kind of, yeah, I don't see. Yeah, so it's probably gonna be in the realm, because I'm looking at the Sims right now, and it's a 15% damage increase from no trinket, but at the same time, a 441 gives you a 14%. So there are some pretty strong trinkets, but I think this is a little bit too much for a 421, and might be a point of decision to address some of the issues with. So outside of Puzzle Box, going into 10.1, we can probably talk about, since we're on this chapter, might as well talk about it. What about the new weapons and trinkets that we're going to go into the raids? We've done a couple of videos on them, and there's quite a few with unique effects, with unique procs. Now, I don't know how much Unholy will like that. What do you guys have been able to test and figure out about the new stuff?
I mean, I probably have the most experience with this because I've been, working on getting them all into Sims, been testing all these special items, all the new embellishments, everything that I can. So I'll start off here, but Unholy kind of likes a lot of the new items that we're seeing. Like Ashkander is pretty dang good, honestly. It's about a 1% DPS increase if you're not fighting humanoids, about 2% if you are, which is perfectly fine for an item that doesn't take up an embellishment slot. So yeah, Ashkinder, Fall of the Brotherhood. And then there's also the Shadowed Raising Annihilator, which is the new blacksmith and crafted weapon. We haven't been able to test it on PTR yet, but I've already done all the math and gone into like what it should be capable of. It could be incredibly strong. It just kind of depends on, does this split damage because it's a tiny 4-yard range, or does it just do full AoE damage to everything it hits? If it doesn't split damage, that's going to be absolutely like an orbital nuke in Mythic Plus or any AoE scenario. It's so much damage, but we're gonna have to wait till we can test it. We can't craft it on PTR yet, but it has a lot of potential.
Okay. Somebody in chat says that it's split. Is this like 100% confirmed and tested, or
we can't test it, so we don't know. But yeah, with its tiny 4-yard range, I'm torn. Like with how small it is, they could very well just make it not split because it's already super limiting with that range. Like that's very, very small.
All right. I mean, Ashkander kind of sounds like it could be really good, especially since it has mastery, and we know Unholy likes mastery. I had like some, not concerns, but I wasn't exactly sure that the Annihilator would also be good. But it's nice to see. It's nice to have some cool weapons to go for, man. And I'm guessing because they. So we've done a video on them, I think about 2 weeks ago, and then like a few days later, they've buffed and nerfed some of these procs, so they're pretty much on top of it, as much as on top of it them as they could be. So we can probably assume that we're not going to have another Gavel where it just has like an outrageous amount of power, or let's say very little power, but it will stay unchanged for a long time. So whatever the end result is, there's probably going to eventually be tuned into a way where hopefully they will be at least competitive. But it's nice to see that we have some good stuff. What about the trinkets, though? Have you guys had a chance to check the trinkets?
I mean, you saw the Sims comparing all the trinkets, right?
Oh, right. No, but we're taking the puzzle box out of the equation.
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, go for it.
Yeah, the class trinket's incredibly strong. Since it procs off of debuffs and dots, for Unholy, this is just incredible. Basically maxes out its proc rate. They actually renamed it. It's like Neltharian Suffering or something like that. Sorry. But yeah. So since it procs off debuffs, dots, it's pretty strong. Gives you just an absolute ton of primary stat when it procs, which Unholy loves. Plus extra shadow damage over its duration. Like, it's an incredibly strong trinket. But it being super rare and off one of the final bosses it's going to be pretty hard to get. So it's one of those things where it's like, the Broodkeeper ring where everybody wants it, but getting it's not going to be the easiest thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
I think it would be the priority though. One can always hope that with this kind of item, if we're the best class to get it, that's going to be very good for us because it means we're going to be first in the queue.
Yeah, it's definitely for Rogue, Priest, Death Knight, and Druid. And it is a versatility trinket, so it doesn't offer any set that usually Unholy wants. And obviously,
I mean, Verse is still fine.
Yeah, I mean, everybody likes Verse. Historically, as far as I know, like Unholy just likes haste, crit, haste mastery or crit mastery, right? Or it's crit more of a frost thing.
Verse is not considered to be one of the strong stats, that's true. But I think that's more of the fact that Unholy scales well with other stats. I think classes that like versatility are classes that don't scale well with other stats.
Yep. And I see you're already peeking at it, the Elementium Pocket Anvil.
Yeah.
A really interesting trinket, honestly. It's going to depend a lot on fight length for this one. Because the damage is ramping up over time with that 1 minute cooldown, it's kind of like Old Warrior's Soul 2.0. The longer the fight goes on for, the more potential this trinket has. But the shorter the fight, it's going to be easily replaced by other trinkets, such as the Glimmering Chromatic Orb, which I think was renamed to Chromatic Essence.
Chromatic Essence.
Which, yeah, really good trinket there as well.
Oh, right. Okay.
I'm pretty hyped for Vial of Animated Blood. Obviously not for Raid. It's the 1.5 minute cooldown doesn't work, but in the Mythic class.
Oh, right. Yes.
It's a good one.
I remember that one.
Yeah, 1 minute 30 cooldown going to fit very nicely with every Unholy Assault. So we're going to get like every second big AoE window is going to be buffed by Vial. So I'm very much looking forward to picking that up and running it in Mythic class. It's going to be an excellent trinket in that space.
I remember this
Oh
back
yeah,
from
absolutely.
Okay. I also have like a general question about trinkets, because I didn't actually see direct sims like these before, and I always had the impression that trinkets are about either 3% of your overall damage or around that kind of a strength, in terms of like 3 to 5% are usually, from what my understanding, usually what trinkets are kind of aiming to provide in terms of power per trinket. But from what I'm seeing on the sims, it's a lot more than that. So is this normal, or are these trinkets just
generally
strong?
Like the damage component is generally that much, but then you also pretty much always have like some strength or some stats that, push it up. So I think around 10% on a max level trinket is quite standard.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Puzzle box ends up to like 50% of its competitors at the same item level. So around 10% seems right.
Oh, right. So I do see like the majority is around 10 to 10 and 11%. Okay. Well, but from what I'm seeing, like there's quite a few trinkets that would be really good. Obviously, where people are always going to aim for Biz, but even so, there's some interesting options to have if you're not satisfied with the Biz, and Vial of Animated Blood being so strong and not being particularly hard to get, outside of, actually dropping or, farming the dungeon, as hard to get, dungeon trinkets are. I think it's going to be okay. And Puzzle Box going away is probably going to be a little bit better. And since we're going to talk about items, what... This is going to be a bigger topic, but what are your guys' opinion on the tier set for Unholy?
All right. This one.
Here we go.
Okay, so the new tier set, the first design they presented us was really bad. The new one is pretty all right, but it's still suffering from the issue of just being generally weaker than our current tier set in terms of how powerful it is. Like, our current tier set is around a 12% increase to our overall damage, while the new one's closer to around a 9%. It'll be even less than that if we consider losing Puzzle Box too, because, mastery buff plus Puzzle Box equals more mastery, So it's in a weird spot. We're probably not going to replace our current tier set until we have the new tier at Mythic item level, and that's another reason why Unholy is falling behind in 10.1. We're losing this big Puzzle Box buff. We're losing 3-4% from our tier set. Going into the next tier, that puts us way behind the scaling curve, which is really concerning, especially when we're looking at specs compared to us like Demonology Warlock, which gets an insane benefit from their tier set, especially in their openers, which pushes them more towards a PI target, which is also scary for us, because if we lose PI, that's 3 things propping us up that are now gone, and Unholy could end up way behind.
I will go to say that the test is okay. Like, I don't have anything against it. It being a bit weaker than the previous one, I think that's just things that's going to happen. They're not going to hit the target exactly every test. The one tier you're going to get a bit weaker one, next tier you might get a bit of stronger one, right? The only thing I want changing with it is the duration of the buff. It's currently 25 seconds. That should really be 25. So you should increase by 5 seconds, because what happens currently is that you get the buff when you buff your gargle, but then it disappears right before you want it at the end. And you don't want to delay it either. You get this weird situation where ideally you want the master buff to overlap the strongest part of your gargle, but delaying it means that you miss out on your army buffing, right? Because you want to use it with Commander Dead. Just buff it to 25 seconds. It's going to help a little bit with the power level, and it's going to make much more sense in the opener. Not going to feel as bad. That's the only kind of thing I want to change. So once they fix that, I'll be overall happy with it.
Yeah, for sure. It's awkward right now.
They haven't changed the amount, right? Because if I recall, last time I checked the tier set, it used to give you like a 12% mastery, or is that the old version of it?
It was 15% initially, then they buffed it to 1% per stack, which is now a maximum of 20. So
okay,
it's a little bit stronger. They also made Army give it 20 stacks of the buff immediately, so we actually get it in the opener. But 20% mastery is still not all that much, especially considering most Unholy DKs have around 50-60% mastery already. Ends up only being a 12 to 13% relative increase. in our mastery, which doesn't even apply to all of our damage sources. It's only around like 80%, so ends up being pretty low on the priority.
Was about to ask, because it's always confusing with mastery numbers. Is the 20% added on top of your current mastery percentage, or is it 20% out of your total mastery gain? It just multiplies your mastery by 20%.
It's an additive buff, which is really strange, and it's also applied before our spec modifier for mastery. So it's just a flat 20% buff. It's not anything extra. It's not that great because of that. If it was a multiplier, it'd be way better.
I see. Definitely, because obviously, without knowing the actual numbers, it felt like, oh, you're losing mastery from the puzzle box, you're getting mastery from the tier set, but it's clearly the numbers are not quite aligning. And without the buffs, or without any addresses to the tier set, even on a mythic level, will we see Unholy really drop in overall performance? Is it just a tuning knob thing, or is it just like an overall design?
It's scaling issues. Like, we're going to start out very strong, and then everyone is going to scale past us because they're going to get better trinkets, better tier sets. They're going to start getting PI kind of thing. So we're going to get this behavior where we start out at the top, and then we're just going to slowly trickle down over time. We might even, if they nerf puzzle box preemptively, we're going to start out in the middle and then kind of just.
Oh man, that's brutal.
Yep.
Well, I mean, hopefully it doesn't turn out that way, because they've done a pretty good job at making Unholy fun and making it relevant for people. I never thought throughout, because however subjective the data that we use for our tier list is, we've kind of kept an eye on all of the specs, and I never really thought Unholy was overpowered or needed like severe nerfs. But it feels like most of the issues that Unholy has over the years are with scaling, although I kind of try to shy away from using that term, because it can imply a lot of things and it might lack context and people might misunderstand it. But it definitely feels like it's hardly to do with what it does, but maybe how it's designed. Do you think that that's an inherent problem that we're always going to have? Is there something that they can fix?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a design flaw with how Unholy's set up in a way. Like, they gave us the spec, they built it out to be this big 3-minute burst spec, and if they're not going to give us all the tools to be able to take advantage of that every single patch, of course it's going to fall behind. If you're going to make a spec a certain way and then you don't provide it with the tools to maximize that, there's just nothing we can do. So it's a bit of a design problem. If we had an alternative build that wasn't so 3-minute focused, it probably wouldn't be so bad. If we had more talent points to wiggle around, it probably wouldn't be so bad either. So there's this combination of like, it's a bit of a design and also a bit of a tuning issue at the same time, but also like, you're not giving us the tools we need issue too. It's weird.
Imagine if we sat here, right, and they chose the opposite dungeon rotation for Mythic Plus, right? So we started out with what we're getting 10.1 now. Unholy would have probably had a higher baseline. Like, they would have had to buff us because we wouldn't have been power on enough. And we would be sitting here going like, next patch, we're getting Possum Mox. It's going to be insane. So I think it's just kind of the flow of things. This happens to most specs that one tier, they get a good tier set, they get a nice trinket, whatever. Things move around. I don't think it's necessarily related to like Unholy's design. It just means that, okay, Unholy's design means that it's like Puzzle Box in the same way as other classes design means that they like other trinkets that are coming up next tier, that kind of thing. I don't mind when people dislike sometimes that it's so heavily focused in the burst window. I do quite like being top DPS at the start of the fight though. I don't mind too much.
Yeah, for sure. And if we're looking at a situation like that, Arcane Mage and Demo Warlocks with Talon next season from Oldman, which is absolutely insane for them. So they're going to kind of get that boost that we're losing going into season 2. So it's going to be interesting to see how things move around with situations like that.
I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing for let's say, I don't want to say overpowered or broken specs, but for performing specs to kind of change season by season. I don't think that's a bad thing. That gives other people other specs time to shine, which is always good because you cannot have everybody be the exact same level. That would just be boring. I'm just a little bit afraid that it might drop a little bit too much because I don't know if I'm like not picking up on it properly, but that's kind of the general vibe that I'm getting, because I remember at the beginning of Shadowlands Unholy was really good, and then it steadily started to drop off, because we've had discussions during Shadowlands as well, and it steadily started to drop off up until I guess when you got Gavel back, which kind of propped it up a little bit. And I'm not a big fan of items or any type of external power system saving the spec, especially now when we have so much power into the spec that's baked internally with the talent system, because you could probably argue that talents are external power too, because you get new rows or not, but is what it is. So that's kind of why I'm a little bit on the fence, but also a little bit hopeful, because they did show a lot of proactiveness in keeping things balanced and making sure that things don't drop off too much unless they're survival. And if you're survival, you're you're just remaking your character. Make it to Unholy. You're probably gonna have a better time.
I feel like it's a different Blizzard now. Like Dragonflight has raised my hopes, because they have really changed a lot of things. Things happen quickly. Things move around quickly. We don't get this kind of stalemate. Like I saw a couple of stats earlier about how has the costs moved around when it comes to rankings in the past couple of weeks, and stuff that didn't get any changes at all. They got downgraded quite a lot, because so much other things got buffed, so much other things got changed. And I really like this, because I feel like this provides precedence that if your class underperforms, it's probably going to get a buff, and you're not safe to just meta swap, because the meta class is going to get nerfed, things are going to change. That's how I want it to be, really.
Yeah, for sure. Seems like every spec is getting their time in the sun, except for survival, because who cares about them?
That's a weird discussion to have, because survival is doing really well on single target, but it's having its single target taken down. Like I think it's still it's right after the red nerf. Survival is still topping Terros overall performance. Although wait a minute, Unholy has creeped up. I haven't seen Unholy so high in the last couple of days, so we're gonna
change it to last 1 day.
Yeah.
So over range of 2 weeks, can change that to over range of 1 day.
There you go. All right. So let's say that this is the situation of Unholy now. It would have to drop a lot to be a below average. I don't know. Is that something that we expect to see, at least in single target, with the changes to the tier set and the loss of puzzle box?
Yes, I'm expecting us to fall 12 to 15% behind the scaling curve. It's a lot.
Okay. You did mention a couple of changes that the tier set could have, unless the tier set is the only thing that it can change. But is there something that they could address to not necessarily keep Unholy melting stuff, but at least not drop it into irrelevancy, which is probably what most people might be afraid of?
If I get the choice to, I would nerf possibles a lot, and then I would buff Gargle and army damage to compensate. I don't think it's a good idea to, I don't know. It's probably not a good idea to buff everything else, because that's going to make us do even better in Mythic Plus, which I don't think is necessarily needed. We do well there anyway. The issue is that when they nerf Possible, that's going to nerf our burst, so they just need to kind of buff the burst again. So buff Gargle, buff army damage, and then we're going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a little bit of an opposite camp. I don't want them to buff our burst more. I'd rather them put it outside of our burst windows, because our burst is already absurd. But rather than that, I think the simplest fix is just giving us a couple extra talent points to play with to make up for the losses we're seeing. Because in AoE right now, we're already picking up basically every talent we could ever want for AoE, except for maybe Pestilence. So it won't be a big buff to AoE, but it gives us a lot more flexibility in raid to go more hybrid rather than only focusing on single target or anything like that, while upping our damage from being able to grab stuff like Blight, stuff like that. So I think that's probably the best way to go about it, but I don't think we're getting talent tree changes this late into the cycle, because we got 2.5 weeks till 10.1.
I don't really know, because we've seen these things happen mid patch. Definitely happened with Feral. We're not going to talk about Shadow Priest's 17th rework of the expansion. That's like a totally different discussion. But we definitely have seen stuff like that. And I'm looking, I was going to try to pull up some dungeon talents that we can look around. Because as far as I can tell from single target, it's pretty much the same. Because I was going to ask a question about builds and potential, variety in terms of playstyle. And the dungeon does have some variety in terms of, I see people play Defile, Ghoulish Monstrosity. I keep wanting to call it Frenzy Monstrosity. I don't know whether they changed the names so many times, all the time, just so that some people just don't remember what they're called. But to kind of circle to my question, and maybe we can expand this into some kind of builds and diversity. Maybe you guys can clue me in. To get some free talent points, I would imagine they would have to cut down on some of the 2 talent point nodes. And from what I see in raids, there's 1, 2, how many instances of 2 talent point nodes being used? I'm assuming that that's how you can shave off some points. They've done this.
You can just make things baseline as well. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, like talents like Unholy Command, Sudden Doom, like most of them, they don't really need to be talents. Like Unholy Command should probably have been baseline all along anyway. It's left side, just below the one that's taken on your
okay, there you go.
there. Yeah, but stuff like that should be baseline. Sudden Doom should probably be baseline too, and they could free up 3 points just by baselining those, and then adjusting the tree a little bit to compensate. But that required tree adjustment is what I'm worried about. They're already really low on time. I don't know if they're going to really be able to get around to doing that.
Probably not for 10.1 release, but I can see it happening if this is indeed an issue that can be fixed through these talent changes. I could definitely see it in 10.1, either a month or 2 into it, or 10.1.5 or something like that. They've done it. I mean, they've done it for Feral a bunch of times. They've done it for Guardian, to my knowledge, and I know they might have tested on some other specs as well. I think Hunter was addressed because Hunter was egregiously heavy on 3-point talents and 2-point talents, so that won't be out of your name. And every time that they made stuff baseline, they would have had to add new stuff in. So I would imagine that also probably adds a level of difficulty as opposed to just reducing maybe points economy, maybe something like that. So with that, in terms of the overall play style, maybe builds potential, would anything change in 10.1 with or without with the tier set? Obviously, we're going to assume that people are going to be rocking the tier set. So
we got our changes. We're not getting a change to 10.1. Everything changed to 10.7, right? So the talent changes, everything like that will be the same.
I meant in terms of builds, what talent builds you're going to be playing, and
they'll be the same, right?
Same builds. Okay.
It's not like the tier set specifically empowers a specific build, that kind of thing. So I think it's going to be very much exactly the same as it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of favors the Death Coil talents for single target, which may kill the single target Defile build. Thank God, but that is what it is.
I thought we didn't speak about single target Defile build.
We don't. It's cursed. Just don't.
Single target Defile? Is that an actual? Can that actually be a thing?
Let me get you a link.
It's awful though. You need to. You have these windows with 4 defiles in a row, so you can keep up the mastery buff for 40 seconds. So you do that 4 defiles in a row, and then you wait to charge up 2 charges, right? And then you do 4 defiles in a row. And it requires the boss and you to stand in those defiles.
Oh, no.
All that time. So it's kind of can you stand in the same spot for 40 seconds? Then this can be good, 1% better. But, I don't want to play it.
Yeah. And you also just can't see anything below the defile. So good luck surviving.
That is such an issue, by the way. Defile is a nice talent, but it covers so much. People don't like to play it. It is by far the best pick in Mythic Plus. But I think people just don't pick it because it's going to kill them. Because you can't see swirlies kind of thing.
I've seen some of the boss testing because we've been more into Mythic Plus testing this time around. So how likely is this to actually be relevant? Because I haven't seen how much I've seen there's always movement, right? But is this even a possibility to be done with sometimes the brave mechanics with all the bosses that you've seen so far? Or is it just
it's possible, but it's cursed.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I wouldn't play it if it was 3% better, maybe, but within 1%, I wouldn't pick this up. It's too much hassle.
Fair enough. Okay, well, At least it's gonna be slightly, but this is weird because in terms of tier set, I cannot wrap my head around on what they want their design to be, because they did mention at the beginning of Dragonflight that they want the first tier set to be slightly simple, slightly passive, so they don't impact the playstyle too much. And on the other hand, the second tier set be more engaged, more specific, more towards certain types of playstyles, which we definitely see for some specs. For instance, I haven't seen the Resto Druid tier set being changed. That would definitely require you to use Flourish. And I don't, obviously in some specs don't have this. Are they not doing the tier sets overall through the same mentality? Or are we just expecting the Unholy tier set to be changed last minute to require you to use, I don't know, Sudden Doom or whatever?
They're definitely pushing Sudden Doom and Harbinger of Doom with this tier set, right? The full set gives you a benefit whenever you consume Sudden Doom proc. So there's a very clear thing here where I feel like they tell us, all right, we want you to actually play Harbinger of Doom. That's that's kind of what I think they're communicating.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just too bad. Like they buffed it, they tried to build a tier set around it, and we still won't pick it.
Yeah, and I mean their stated goal of making it more powerful, more interesting, more engaging than the previous tier set kind of like flipped around for Unholy. Like its first tier set was really, gameplay engaging. You make sure you have to pop Festering Runes, every 5-6 seconds to make sure you upkeep the buff on your ghoul, which then buffs you. And it kind of created this really cool gameplay cycle. And the new tier set is just like, okay, this is entirely passive. You just get things from playing the game. It's kind of, it's weird. They flipped them around, it seems. I don't know. New tier set's not as engaging.
It's a bit of a hassle. Like a 5-second buff upkeep is quite annoying to keep up. So yeah,
I agree there.
They had loads early on Unholy and Dragonflight. Like we had so many things being like 5-6 seconds, which they then buffed to 10 seconds. Like Playbringer used to be, was it 6 seconds?
6 seconds.
Like Talents used to be 6 seconds, right? They buffed all those to 10 seconds because it, surprise, it's real hassle when you have 6-second buff upkeep. So I'm kind of, to some degree, I'm a bit happy that it's going to be removed because it's not like a specific play around it. But you still feel like the pressure of having to, press your skirt strike you, burst that wound. And it's a bit stressful. So
yeah, for sure. And the current tier set does push us away from the potential no Festering Strike build too. So that's a thing.
No Festering Strike.
Oh, man, that is bloody cursed, by the way.
I
don't understand one thing.
It's the first talent you pick. What do you mean no Festering Strike?
We just straight up ignore it.
Oh,
you don't press it. Like you only press it to build up for Apocalypse, and then you just clone shadows the rest of the time. They need to, I don't understand when they buff Skirt Strike. It would seem obvious to me that buffing Festering Strike should happen in tandem, right? Otherwise, you're going to start moving around the kind of goalposts, or kind of like where we start ending up in the no Festering Strike territory. Festering Strike deals abysmal damage to start with. I think they should just buff it, like make it twice as good. I think that would be a good change. Move damage out of our burst windows means that we don't, completely ignore it, possibly in the future.
So is it
for sure?
Is the issue tied with the direct damage that Festering does? Because obviously it consumes 2 runes, but it doesn't deal the same amount of damage as Core Strike hitting twice, which is obviously the 2 globals. But you would imagine that. I mean, I'm thinking that the reason why they're not, doing more instant damage is probably because it applies Festering Wound, but then you pop Festering Wound anyway. So is there a world where Festering Wound is becoming more relevant? But I don't. There's a lot of
we just use Infected Claws to generate all the wounds we need. Basically, like instead of pressing Festering Strike, we just let our pet generate the wounds for us, and we ignore it. Like,
well, I mean,
you need to be.
What was about to say? These things kind of remind me of 2 things. So the no Festering Strike definitely reminds me of how Shadow Priest was now, where you could actually play the game without a very crucial spell in your rotation. You could actually ignore it. It wasn't necessarily the best, but it did provide some benefits. Survival Hunter kind of ignores Wildfire Bomb in single target, or at least tries to ignore it as much as possible. And we're seeing in the season just them trying to put as much stuff into Wildfire Bomb as possible. So I'm not sure if this ever becomes a thing. I have a feeling that they will probably address it at one point, because this is a little bit silly. Because this is definitely the most egregious out of all of them. It's your most basic ability. I mean, when you're talking about introducing a person or a new player to Unholy, it's like, okay, take this first, but then you're like, oh, but you're not gonna use it. But it's like, what do you mean? It's like the first thing.
Yep, you need to be careful. It's like a gameplay loop, right? You press Festering Strike, and then you press Curse, right? You know, it's supposed to be that way. And if you start, you know, if you start having a weird balance, you know, it's going to take you out of that, which is going to be bad.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the major things that's contributing to the potential for it as well in 10.1 is the fact that Elementium Pocket Anvil, that trinket, also only procs off Festering Strike, Scorch Strike or Clawing Shadows, which means that the more we can press that, the more we can proc Elementium Pocket Anvil, which, yeah.
Jesus. Okay. So to fix this, would they have to like just overall buff it by how much? Because my dumb brain is just looking, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's doing a total of 116% attack power, but it's using 2 runes. Scorch Strike is doing about, what is it, 63% attack power, but it's using 1 rune. So 2 Scorch Strikes do definitely more damage than Festering Strike. And if you have another source of applying wounds, then you definitely take away some of the main reasons why you would use Festering Strike. So is this just a case of, oh, let's just make it do, I don't know, 200% attack power scaling? Is this just a simple scaling issue, or is the issue deeper?
It's a bit of both. Like with Infected Claws, we already generate a bunch of wounds, so we already basically barely ever press Festering Strike as is. Like if you look at Sims, it's like 6 times per minute that it's pressed, and it's mostly just used for Apocalypse. So we're already getting pretty close. So there's that, and there's the fact that wounds themselves and Festering Strike just don't do a whole lot of damage. Like wounds end up being like 2% of our overall damage. Festering Strike is like 1% of our overall damage. They're just so weak that we just have no real want or need to press it.
I'm looking at my Terros log here. I pressed Festering Strike 21 times and Clawing Shadows 62 times. Ooh. So you do like 3, and it was 1.8% to my DPS. So it's like it is one of our core abilities in the like our rotation, and it deals 1.8% of our overall. I feel like that's a bit low, isn't it? Obviously, you don't want to end up situations where you just spam Festering Strike and you overcap on wounds, but I don't think that's going to happen either. I think they could buff it like 100%, and it would still work out. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. They could buff it a lot more than that. Like they could double it and make it shadow damage, and it would still be like a good balance between pressing it and Clawing Shadows or Scorch Strike.
That's what I was about to ask, because there has to be a line or a breakpoint where too much will just make you ignore other resources, and we've had this place out for.
You don't want to end up there either.
Okay. Yeah. Well, all right.
Unholy is always a balancing act,
It feels like it's so Unholy is a very cool spec, but it feels like it has so many different engines going into it as opposed to what other specs have. Well, not all of the other specs, because Shadow Priest is also an example of this, that it has a lot of engines going into its rotation, and we see how the adventure of Shadow Priest going from expansion to expansion is. We don't really want another example of a constantly reworked and retuned and readdressed spec, but it definitely feels a little bit harder to play. And kind of like, unless you guys have like something specific to it, I was going to ask you a more overarching question about the overall impression, because Unholy is maybe one of the specs that we have on this channel, and together with you guys have been more observant of ever since, obviously ever since Shadowlands, but also through the beta for Dragonflight and the talent iterations that it went through. What do you guys feel about the evolution of Unholy so far? From Shadowlands, if people have been playing it, or for however long back you want to go for, into what it is now, because I feel like it has gotten a lot of improvements, and I'm kind of still a little bit surprised that there's always something that needs to be addressed, and it's not necessarily a small thing this time around.
I don't know. It's been like 6.5, 7 years since Unholy's Legion rework, and it hasn't really changed since. And the core that was introduced in Legion with Festering Wounds, it's just flawed inherently. It's old rug combo points. You're always going to be stuck with, those wounds are always on one target. You can take like Vile Contagion and spread them, but that's once every 90 seconds. That's not really helping that issue. Can't use half of our abilities. Then we have this weird, Festering Strike, Scourge Strike balance that we have to go through as well. And I don't know. I feel like the core of the spec itself, Festering Wounds themselves, it's too dated. It's too flawed, and they just need to, bite the bullet and get rid of them already. I know people love the Bursting Swords build, but you can recreate something like that without having wounds be so limiting.
No, that's true. I feel like current Unholy is fun to play. Currently, it is.
Oh yeah.
I think one of the most fun iterations of Unholy, at least from my point of view. I think the raid build is engaging. It is optimizable, something I really want. So you can actually tell the difference between a good and bad player. And I think Mythic Plus is also quite a lot of fun. Interestingly, like the current disease build in Mythic Plus, it doesn't rely much on your wounds. So it kind of gives you a window into, all right, what does Unholy play like without wounds? Because you don't pay much attention to them. Like I barely hit Festering Strike in Mythic Plus a couple of times maybe, but generally wounds are just there to give you like wounding power, nothing else. Yeah. It kind of gives you a good view, like, okay, what's Unholy like without wounds? Well, go play Mythic Plus with a disease build. That's kind of what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
And that's with Festering Might too?
What's that?
That's with also Festering Might?
Yeah, well, your pet to place the wounds and then you kind of just burst them and you don't really care about pressing Festering Strike. It's just a bit more like a passive, these things come up and you burst them, but you don't actively actually play around it kind of vibe.
Yeah, just don't pay attention to them at all. We don't really have a single target either. Like the wounds right now are just kind of ignored for the most part. We use them, but like we're not actively engaging with them.
I see.
And I also obviously, I like to bring up BFA because I think BFA Unholy and Raid was like the most boring instance of Unholy that you can imagine. There was absolutely zero skill expression. I don't know if you remember, but it was kind of like, you did your core rotation with building up wounds, bursting them, you had your apocalypse and so on, but like there was nothing else. So you could sit there and you do your like core rotation the entire fight, and you're like, okay, I could do that. But so could, everyone else playing the spec. So you were like, okay, well, all right, you got procs, that's why you got a good log. You got good gear, that's why you got that. I hate that. Much more better nowadays where it's a true optimization kind of midi game.
Yeah, for sure. But I would attribute that to more like having 20 spinning plates than actually like having a core engaging rotation.
Yeah.
Definitely remember the days. I mean, they did do a couple of good things for Unholy over the years with making what is it called? Army of the Damned became a talent in Shadowlands that was an Azurite trait, and it also ended up. I remember it ended up incorporating the Magus, and I don't remember if it used to also reduce the cooldown of Army of the Dead initially, or that was just added post. But I know that Epidemic was also included into it. We got Unholy Blight. And now I'm seeing Defile being played, which we haven't seen in a long time. And at least Mythic Plus has some build variety to it. Although the issues still stand, I do feel like Unholy is one of the most fun iterations that I have personally played with my limited interaction. I mean, I've played a lot in BFA, played a lot in Shadowlands, and I think it's still one of the examples of a good spec, but it probably has some design issues. Maybe we can keep our fingers crossed, considering the willingness, let's say, for them to rework certain things. I don't know if like a complete overhaul is necessary, but from Taez's point on wounds, maybe that is. It seems like it's I'm
trying to think about. So I often approach this with what is a realistic change they can make in this specific expansion to the talent tree, right? What could we realistically, they won't do too big of an overhaul. To be honest, though, Rift got quite a big one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my question is, what would we change with this talent tree if it was within the current kind of confines of what they're willing to change? I'm not sure, Tez, do you have any... the point is, I can't, immediately think about, okay, this is what they should change with the talent tree.
I mean, there's so many talents in the tree we just never take. They could get rid of Feasting Strikes, we wouldn't notice. Could get rid of Replenishing Wounds, we wouldn't notice. They could get rid of Harbinger of Doom, we would not notice. They could get rid of Pestilence, we wouldn't notice. They could get rid of Ruptured Vishura, we would not notice.
Console. But yeah,
I mean, right. Yeah.
They have been trying to prop these up. Like the changes they made are specifically made to, okay, we'll see these talents not picked very much, let's buff them. The issue is that they didn't buff them enough. To be honest, Rotten Touch is now played, so good on them. They managed to get there. But I think they need to do more about the other talents to make sure they actually do get picked up.
Yeah, for sure. Because, I mean, if you could delete like a third of the talents in the tree and we would not notice at all, there's some issues.
Yeah, they also make rare changes sometimes. Like they buffed the runic command to also give you runic corruption, right? And it's kind of like, we have this talent that gives you resources. Let's give you more resources when you pick it. And the reason we don't pick it to start with is because we don't need resources, right? So why would we make it? Why would we pick it if they give us more resources from it? Same thing with the Festering Strike, right? Runic Mastery, sorry. Yeah. They need to make, all right, so the real change you need to make here is those talents that only give you resources also needs to give you damage. So if Runic Mastery increases your runic power and increases the damage from your runic power consuming abilities, for instance, that would be a much more attractive pick. So I think they tried to buff things that were underused, but they buffed it in the wrong way, which means that we still don't pick it. So,
yeah, for sure. Like giving resources more resources when we don't need more resources is not going to make them good.
Have some resources with your resources to go with your resources. Yeah, it's not. Unfortunately, this is not a symptom of just Unholy. It feels like oh my god, why am I keep giving this example? But it definitely feels like survival as well, where they're buffing and trying to shoehorn people into playing wildfire bombs, even though wildfire bombs not only do very, very, very little damage, but in single target you kind of actively try to avoid pressing them as well. And instead of addressing maybe like the core issue, they're just trying to push stuff that's not properly working. And also, I'm not sure.
You're back real quick.
Sure, I'm not sure if this is ever going to change, but hey, we can at least be
trying. Eh?
Yeah, they're definitely more active, and they're definitely listening to feedback. At least for,
and I think they're probably afraid as well of over buffing talents.
Sure.
With Unholy, right? They addressed improved Festering Strike. They looked at Runic Mastery. They looked at Harbinger of Doom as just 3 examples, which are 3 very unused talents. And as I said, they tried to buff it. They just didn't do it enough. Harbinger Doom, they added death call damage to when you consume Sudden Doom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remastered gave you more resources. Improved Festering Strike. What was it?
Increased damage.
Strike gave you also more resources. So one of those 3 that did actually buff our damage, it just wasn't enough. I think hopefully we will see another iteration where they go over the talents, be like, okay, Unholy players, they never pick these up. Let's buff them a little bit more. And that's going to give us more kind of talent diversity.
Fair enough. I did want to add some Frost questions, but I think we can leave that for another time if you guys are still down for it, because I do have a lot of Frost DK questions, mostly related to the fact that when I DM'd you guys, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, about the situation with all this, it kind of led me to believe that you guys think Frost is going to be a little bit better, which is not necessarily a bad or a good thing. It's just something that hasn't happened in a while. But we can probably leave that for, I don't know, whenever you guys have another chance to come up for a chat. But in like closing statements, do you guys have anything else to address that is probably good to be out there for people to know, maybe for the devs to know, on the off chance that maybe somebody's going to watch this and take a little bit of feedback from it?
Only thing I have is stop letting specs be propped up so heavily by external sources, such as items. Like, the only reason Unholy's been viable this entire patch is because, Puzzle Box exists. Its tier set is really good. We benefit a ton from Power Infusion. If you take all those away, you look at the core, the base of the spec, Unholy is not in a good spot right now. If you add all of those back in, it looks incredible. Don't get me wrong, but we shouldn't have trinkets that are 50% more powerful than anything else. That should have been nerfed a long time ago. Our benefit from Power Infusion probably should have been, scaled back in some way, because gaining as much as we do from Power Infusion is also unhealthy for the game. It makes people want to push it onto us or any other specific spec way more than you know, having that option of, hey, I really like this player, they're doing really good, I'm going to give it to them. It's really taking away player choice, player expression, because like if you start a new Unholy DK, the very first thing we're going to tell you to do right now is sit in Agathar Academy until you get Puzzle Box. There is no other choice there. That's what you have to do as a starting point, and it's an issue. Really is. It's taking away from the game, it's taking away from the fun, taking away from player expression and freedom. Like, it shouldn't be a thing.
It is indeed much better when you have, you know, real choice. Look at Frost, for instance. There's laser trinkets they can use, which are all kind of good. It would be much better if Unholy was in the same spot, because it removes that over-reliance on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's definitely going to be obvious moving into the next patch, and they have been very public with some of the changes that they make and addressing them. Like, okay, this is really too strong. Like, how I always come back to the Beastmaster Hunter bow, where they systematically nerfed it, I think about twice or at least once, and then they buffed the specs that were kind of propped up by the bow, maybe a little bit too much. Maybe some of the buffs weren't necessarily mandatory, because now we're seeing more nerfs to BM. But I think I would like to live more in this world where there's some little tuning knobs, like, okay, it's a little bit too much, a little bit too low, but we're taking away the reliance on an item. Which, I mean, it's cool when you get that item, but when you realize that that item is going to go away and your spec is still going to be a little bit bad without it, I'm talking about Puzzle Box or maybe and even the tier set now, that's not going to feel that great for a lot of players. And although they are nerfing the Vault tier sets going to the next one, that's probably going to feel even worse for Unholy hopping into the next race. So hopefully this is being addressed in some way, or at least in due time, for people not to start the new raid. It's like, okay, I cannot play Unholy because it's, you know, Frost is probably better. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but that shouldn't be a reason for people not to play a spec, because it's just losing stuff moving from one patch to another.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think we covered most of the things. I still think for anybody who's watching this and wondering, I don't think this should discourage you from playing Unholy. Unholy is not necessarily in the best state, and even if it's losing stuff, it's likely not going to be that bad. Blizzard don't let specs sit at the bottom of the barrel for too long, or at least they haven't in the last couple of months. So I think people should be fine for that. It's just a matter of time or when they're going to, you know, address those issues. So hopefully we answered some questions, and thank you very much, guys, for agreeing to do this kind of on a short notice. Really nice to know that you're always there to help us out. And definitely, guys, if you're playing DKs, any DKs, but especially Unholy as well, do check the Acherus Discord channel. That's where you will find both Taez and Biceps, and any question that you have. It's one of the coolest community out there to be. Anything that you want to learn about Unholy, you can definitely check them out. They have also online guides. Biceps also has a channel. We'll have all of the links down in the description so you guys can reach the wonderful guests that we had today. So thank you again, guys, for indulging my silly and stupid questions about Unholy once more.
You're good, man. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
No worries. So maybe we can do a follow-up Frost episode sometime soon, whenever you guys have the opportunity.
For sure, yeah.
It will be super interesting to put this into perspective and compare the two.
For sure. Just give me a time and a date and I'll be there.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.